We will now call to order the Legislation and Rules Committee meeting for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. Please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Alderman Clark Hubbard, unmute. There you go. Here, all right, now we can hear you. All right, thank you.
Vice Chair Velasquez.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. Chair Vollmer.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Aldridge. We have 4 present. We have a quorum.
All right, a quorum being present, we'll move to approve the minutes of Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right, Rosalind, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Vice Chair Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. Chair Vollmer.
All
Chair
right.
Vollmer.
No, hello.
Okay, you say aye.
Aye. All right, by your vote, we have approved the minutes of Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. We'll now move to item number 4, board bills for review. Item number 1, I've asked Rosalind to correct it. My agenda says Board Bill 130, which is a speed hump bill, which we will not be hearing today. We'll be doing Board Bill 137 by Alderwoman Velasquez. Let the sponsor please take it away. Proceed.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to share my screen, if that's all right with the chair.
All right, would you like to give a brief overview for those who may not know what this bill is?
Yes, I will give my overview before I share the screen. So, Board Bill 137, as the chair mentioned, is not a speed hump bill. It is a bill to establish a municipal ID program, also known as the Gateway Program. So today, obviously, I'm going to go through an overview of the bill. We've got folks from the mayor's office and the treasurer's office who will also testify. But this bill is just, it establishes on focusing the program, and as I get into explaining it, a lot of the details will be at the discretion of the program administrator, which is the treasurer's office. So with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen again. I've got a little presentation because you guys know that I like to do those. So let's see. Share, and then, okay, can everybody see my screen?
It is visible to me, yes.
All right, well, since we already gave the overview of the program, so again, today I'm going to just go through what is a municipal ID, why there's a need for this, and why I filed this bill now, the benefits of what we're calling the Gateway Card. I'm going to go through some concerns of what this ID does not do, and some of the details. We are not alone in this, the idea of a municipal ID. There are plenty of other cities around the country who do this, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, as well as one of our favorite things is talking about the fiscal note that's attached to it. And then we'll obviously open it up for questions. And I know we should have some folks who are going to join later today to testify from the community. So first, what is a municipal ID? The basic, most simple definition here, and in the legislation, it's a government-issued photo ID that is open to all residents and helps them connect to essential city services. A big thing that we found is that often you need an ID to do things like apply for a job, rent an apartment, and do things that basically be involved in our economy and community. So a lot of times why you might hear people say, well, why can't everybody get an ID? Sometimes it is difficult for people. There are barriers, including cost, including having a hard time getting the right documents. Sometimes people who might be housing insecure or unhoused, or those that are recently incarcerated may have difficulty meeting all the requirements for other sorts of ID. And really the idea behind this ID is that it is something that is an entry-level accessible thing for everybody. And if I'm going to shout out, Mos Def once asked Common in a song, how can I get ID if I don't have ID? I wouldn't need ID. This sort of answers that question in the sense that, you know, we really want something that can be accessible to all city residents. So the need. So this number is based on some data from the Missouri ID State Access Network. And in the past 2 years, nonprofit organizations have basically fielded at least 5,000 inquiries for people seeking the need for an ID. So there is an actual need from what we've seen. Now they also looked at the region, so there's a bigger need than that, but of course we were just focused on the city. So in the same survey, they found that these folks who don't have a photo ID, 64% of those people have a hard time accessing banking services. 72% of those folks reported challenges in security in securing employment, and 42% of those people cited that another factor was instability in housing. So really having something that is accessible to all residents of the city will help people do the things we want them to do to be productive members of society, which is, you know, being able to be employed, being able to have rent an apartment, and basically live their lives in addition to spending money and contributing to the economy, and doing things that most folks do. So just some other benefits. I've talked about jobs and housing access. We've talked a little bit about reaching those who need it most. Again, I mean, folks who are recently incarcerated, housing insecure, low income. Of the folks that the Missouri State ID Access Coalition surveyed, 85% of residents also said that, 85% of the people surveyed said that cost was an issue and a barrier for them to get an ID. So one of the pieces of this program is that it's at no cost to people who need an ID. And another thing that's come up, and it's a concern, but also I think a benefit, is that really making an ID accessible for anybody who wants it contributes to community safety. So, I mean, if, you know, this is an ID that law enforcement will recognize, local law enforcement, emergency services, I mean, basically, it's much safer for the person themselves and for a community that they have an ID to be identified versus not being identified. And one of the other benefits on this card is that the way we have it set up is that if you're 65 years or older for our senior citizens, as long as the information on your card doesn't change, this card never expires. So it's something that, again, we've seen sometimes people have mobility issues, and, you know, again, that can create a barrier in getting an ID or renewing or updating it. But for senior citizens, and we've seen the city, this can be a real benefit for them because they don't have to get it replaced if nothing changes with their information. So just to kind of address some of those concerns of what this card does not do, this card cannot be used for voting. It basically cannot preempt anything that cannot supersede Missouri law. So it is not a suitable ID card for voting. It cannot be used for things that the state already identifies as age restricted thing identification. So can't buy alcohol with it, can't buy tobacco. And then it does not change status. So it does not grant a right to lawful presence or status. It does not do any of that. It is simply a way for people who don't have access for an ID to get an ID in the city of St. Louis. So some of the details about the program, as I mentioned, and you'll be hearing from the Office of the Treasurer, we've outlined that the program administrator is the treasurer. During this process, the Treasurer's Office has been a wonderful partner, working with me on the bill, as well as talking to different advocacy groups or folks from different area, I don't want to say marginalized, but groups that might need this ID. So And they've listened and really understood kind of what are the baseline things that people are looking for. And so how the bill is written, a lot of the details of the day-to-day program will be determined by the program administrator, including, I mean, you have to have proof of identity. And so those will be determined by the program administrator as well as a proof of residency. What we've outlined in the bill is that residency is defined as 15 days or more in the city. But as far as what specific documents will be required to present proof of identity, that will be up to the treasurer's office. I know they're very thorough, and in other cities that have this program, there's usually two forms of identification. One's usually a photo ID. We've talked to the Office of the Treasurer, and I know that making sure that we use the best documents and that we are doing, and we're safeguarding its fraud and misrepresentation is at the top of his mind. And so I know that will be a part of the program, but the specifics of what documents are acceptable, that will be up to the program administrator. Another key thing we heard from people and the need and the barrier for this ID again is that it's really important to have same day ID. So what we've outlined is that you can apply for the ID, folks will bring their documents, we will not keep any of the supporting documentation, and then people will be able to get their ID the same day that they apply for it. And this is an important part of it, because again, if you think if people don't have necessarily a secure place, or they might not be at the same place in 2 weeks, or they might be at a shelter, having something to mail out presents another barrier. So it's really important that we have a same day ID, that there will be a central office, which is how it's written in the bill, but a place where people can get their ID and go on with their lives. And then again, as I mentioned before, it will be at no cost to residents. So, again, we've all kind of seen an ID card. So what we've outlined in the bill is the card shall include, but is not limited to, name, photograph, address, date of birth, expiration date. And then just, again, this is an ID for all ages. So for minors, the card will be valid for 5 years. For adults under the age of 65, it's valid for 10 years. And as I mentioned before, for adults 65 years or older, it doesn't expire as long as the information stays current. And then, and of course, the design of the card and, some of the details will be up to the program administrator. These are not outlined in the bill. But other cities with ID programs, obviously most closest to us is Kansas City. They just launched theirs in January of this year so far. And they've been, as we were trying to shape the bill and figure out kind of the details and the costs, they've been excellent. They've been an excellent resource. So they launched their ID in January. And when we asked them how many IDs they'd issued by mid-September, they'd already issued more than 6,000. So, we can see that there is a relevant need in Missouri. Chicago established, they call theirs a city key. They started theirs in 2017. And really, why we're starting off small, this is essentially like the model, because it's more than an ID. Their city key is their transit card. It's a library card. You can get discounts with it. And it's something that, as we hopefully create the gateway card, that it's something that we can grow into as a city. And this can really be not just an ID for folks who need it, but something that is really a gateway to the city, in the sense that we can have public-private partnerships, and restaurants want to chip in and offer a discount, and we're looking for banking partners who will honor this ID as something that folks who might be unbanked can use. And that's really what Chicago does with their city key. And then New York, I believe, has the longest program, and they launched their ID NYC back in 2014. So the estimated cost, and again, as I mentioned, we worked, and shout out to Ryan Coleman for helping us put this together. We got a lot of really great data from Kansas City, down to what kind of machines they used and the cost of the cards. So we feel, like we've got a pretty good handle on the cost. So it starts out as $280, and of course at $280,000. and some change for buying the machines. And of course, the biggest cost is staffing. And in what we have right now is a program manager, 2 administrative assistants, and 1 part-time administrative assistant. And of course, these are estimates, and so it's up to the treasurer or the program administrator to how they want to do this. Some of those folks in Kansas City do double roles too. So I mean, but that's where the estimated cost is. And again, we feel like it's a pretty accurate cost. And if you want the kinds of machines they use, we can find that out for you. But they were pretty open to sharing the details of how they got their program off the ground. So that's all I have for now. Chairman, I don't know if you want to take questions briefly from the committee before hearing testimony, or how you'd like to proceed.
At this point of, we have, do we have 3 speakers signed up? Is that my understanding? How many speakers you have on your?
We have 3.
Okay. I believe we have Adam, Casey, and Cheryl. Those are the 3.
Yes.
All right. Is there any order of appearance sponsor you'd like to have them going?
No, I'd say the mayor's office or the treasurer's office, and there might be a few more people hopping on in the panel section, but I can't see what Rosalind sees from my screen. So,
Okay. Well, I will go at this point. We'll go with people who are, these are part of your presentation, correct?
yeah. So let's start with the mayor and the treasurer.
Okay. All right. So we'll go to the mayor, treasurer. As long as they're part of your presentation, we'll do that. And then once the presentation is complete, then we'll go to questions for the things. And after that, if there are public comments or such, we'll give time for that afterwards. Okay, so that gives Rosalind time to get the things in order. So from the president's office, who do we have here today?
The mayor's office, we have Sarah.
Mayor's office. Where are we at? Sarah?
Yeah. Hi,
Okay.
Alderman Vollmer. Thank you.
Okay. No, we'll have to swear you in before we have you speak in case you say something we don't believe.
Gotcha.
So please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony will give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you may proceed. Please state your name and your position for the record.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Baker. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Jones. I'm subbing in lieu of my colleague Casey this afternoon, so thank you for bearing with us. I first want to say that we strongly support BB 137 and offer a lot of gratitude to Alderwoman Velasquez and Treasurer Lane for bringing this important legislation forward to serve the city of St. Louis. I won't be too redundant because the Alderwoman covered a lot of this information in her presentation, but I did want to underscore why we support legislation like this in the city of St. Louis. There is a documented need for a municipal ID program. Those who struggle with getting access to a government ID often struggle with other things like banking and housing and employment. Anything we can do to help St. Louis residents get on their feet and be more active members of the community, we want to support and make sure that they have access to. This is more of an opt-in program. As the Alderwoman covered, this isn't something that can be used to register for voting. It bears no status on your immigration status, and it has no ability to convey federal or state benefits to you. There are many, many areas that the state of Missouri preempts local municipalities like St. Louis from acting and from using their powers around identification. But this legislation is narrowly tailored and avoids many of those pitfalls. For the city government, what this means is that we will be having our residents have another tool in their toolbox to access us. Right? They can use it to identify themselves in front of government offices. They may be able to use it to identify themselves in front of government officials like local law enforcement. And going down the line in the future, hopefully it can be linked to things like library cards or perhaps bus transit and other areas that would help our residents get around the city of St. Louis. As the Alderwoman also mentioned, we're not the first to do it, but one of the benefits that it has for a city like ours is to cultivate a sense of identity of what it means to be part of St. Louis. One of the pieces of this legislation that I think is really powerful is you can access this identification after only having 15 days as a resident within the city of St. Louis. That means right away from the very beginning, we're helping folks integrate into our community and see what it means to be a St. Louisian. That could mean pairing it with benefits like discounts at restaurants or museum access or things like that, all of which we enjoy in the city of St. Louis. It could also mean pairing it with a library card or other tools that people use in the city of St. Louis to really dig in and see what this community is like. We also appreciate the great lengths that Treasurer Lane has taken and Alderwoman Velasquez have taken to make sure that this legislation protects personal privacy. We're only intaking information necessary to create this card, and we're not holding on to that original documentation. Furthermore, this legislation goes out of its way to make sure that the identifications are accessible, particularly providing for language access so everyone in our community will be able to access this identification. And it's a great idea that we're not having an expiring ID for senior citizens who wish to access this program as well, so they don't have to come back in, do paperwork again to access the benefits that this card provides. So for these reasons, we'd like to offer our strong support to Alderwoman Velasquez's bill, and I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Okay, we'll hold questions for everyone afterwards to go on with the presentation, but thank you very much. Next, Mr. Lane from the Treasurer's Office.
Yes.
Please raise your right hand. I know you're elected, but we got to do this, everybody. Do you swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, please proceed.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you for having me here today. Also in favor and in full support of this bill. I want to thank the Alderwoman for bringing this forward and thank the Mayor's Office for their support as well. I won't reiterate all the wonderful things that have already been said, but in the Treasurer's Office, I am focused on economic upward mobility for everyone in St. Louis. So I'll speak to those aspects and why this card can help with that. The Alderwoman did speak about how oftentimes there are folks who maybe are newly unincarcerated, and we know we also live in a very transient region. And with the transient region, people have non-traditional households, non-traditional ways of keeping information, and being able to properly identify themselves to a potential employer so that they can be able to pay for that state ID or other documentation that they need to get their life restarted can be difficult. And I just see this as a gateway to be able to do that. So a way that our city can say that we're offering hopefulness as opposed to hopelessness. One of the things that we're thinking about in future iterations of this card, like other cities are doing, is being able to connect to other resources. I'm all about saving the city money, but if we have this card that is able to act as a link for other city resources, being able to put any assistance program dollars on that, any programs that we're working with other organizations in the city on to provide for assistance to our residents, this card will already exist. It will cut down that the time needed to actually get those benefits to folks, but also cut down on the cost that the city will have in terms of being able to find a card provider, vendors, mail out checks, whatever it may be. So it is an opportunity, especially down the road, to be more efficient and also act as a cost saving for the city, but also reduce that time gap between us getting crucial and needed services out to our residents. Also with our youth and families. So again, another area where I know we're all focused on, but I tend to tune into when we think about youth and families, having worked with youth before, knowing that, again, there are a lot of non-traditional households out there. And with those non-traditional households, you can have some youth that, between 16 and 18, we'll say, who are in a different housing situation. They might be unhoused. We know that 1 out of every 5 students in our public school system are housing insecure. But with that doesn't just come with finding a place to live, but being able to access, or maybe there's a loss of access to original birthing documents, and those documents needed to get an ID. And this can be a helpful step in that process to make sure that our youth are taken care of and they're able to be the young adults and contribute to our society in the way that we know that they can, without proposing more roadblocks. So a way to reduce that barrier for our young people in those non-traditional spaces as well. That is all that I will say. From our office standpoint, again, we are happy to stand up this program. We're happy to work with other city offices to make it better and iterate over time to see how far we can actually take this and be a beacon on a hill in this way. So we're happy to do it. I'm happy that my office has the opportunity to move this vision forward. So again, thank you all for listening, and thank you, Alderwoman Velasquez, for bringing this to fruition.
All right, thank you very much. From that, we have, I believe, Cheryl, one more speaker lined up for you, Alderwoman. All right, do we have her visible?
Or actually, which organization is Cheryl
Sure.
with? I think that might
Sure.
be Chess.
Is it Shirley?
Oh, Shirley
Yes.
from the treasurer's office.
Is that,
She's online.
okay,
no.
is she set to speak or no?
I don't think so. Treasurer Lane,
Okay.
is there anything that,
She just,
No.
I thought saw her on a list. Okay, that's fine.
We're all set.
Okay, if that concludes the presentation, I will open it up to questions. And since Alderman Cohn's there, Alderman Ryan, do you have any questions of the sponsor or her present?
Yes, thank you, Chair Volmer. So I've gotten kind of pushback in both directions on this bill from folks in my ward. Some of the cons that I've heard is that it'll legitimize people that shouldn't be legally present. I don't think that this can confer any additional benefits to anyone. But I think that the very real concern for me here is having someone with a different name on a municipal ID than what is on their state ID, and the confusion that could bring about, particularly if we're not identifying what we're going to use to prove your identification and residency. Can you, Alderwoman, or the treasurer or anyone else identify what kind of documents, what kind of safeguards that there's going to be in place to make sure that we're actually giving an ID to someone who that's their name and that's who they are?
yeah, I'll start with that, Alderman Ryan and Treasurer Lane, if you want to, we can tag team this. So we did talk about that thoroughly, and one of the reasons all the lists of documents is not in the legislation is because things can change, and we just thought it'd be more flexible and a more cleanly written piece of legislation without listing potential documents. All that we've seen and what we've discussed is that typically there are it requires two forms of identification documents. One of them we've seen, it's usually a photo ID, so the names do not change in those proof of identification. So you have two documents that show proof of identity. So that's bucket A. And then you'd have to do bucket B, which is proof of residency. It would be a separate document. That might be a utility bill, that might be a water bill, that might be a phone bill. I mean, that would be kind of TBD as to what the program administrator would consider proof of residency, but you'd have a proof of residency as a separate piece, so line or thing 2, and then you'd have to show two proof of identity documents. So those could be, like we've seen, a driver's license, a passport, an expired passport for up to, maybe 5 to 10 years, depending on like what other cities do, a passport from a different country. There's a list of several documents. So like if you look at Chicago or Kansas City or New York, in the program guidelines, there's very specific ways to very specific documents that are required to show proof of identity, and then a separate bucket for a residency document. So, I mean, that was one of the concerns, that you wouldn't just be able to change the name, right? Because it wouldn't be consistent if you had two different official documents. So all what we've seen, and again, Treasurer Lane as the program administrator can speak to this, every other city who's done this has official documents that show proof of identity. One of them typically has a photo ID, and they have to match. And then there's a separate and proof of residency. So proof of identity and proof of residency.
Yep. And I would just add, Alderman Ryan, so in addition to what Danielle said, so for example, someone could use an expired ID to get Immuni ID. So whether that's passport, state license, we will be checking. So there's the verification process. I guess it's, you know, more of a three-step. So it is residency, it's our, you know, identity. Are you who you say you are? And then if there's anything else on that check that should be on that license, or again, if let's say a driver's license was revoked for whatever reason, any checks on that, which doesn't prevent you from getting an ID, but at least we're doing our due diligence to make sure that this person isn't restricted from getting an ID. So there's that third check. So if there's anything on there, which when we checked into it's super minimal, that will be a third part of that check as well. But we're not going to reinvent the wheel on this. So we're going to look at, we've already looked at what other cities are doing. We're going to be following that. And then the folks that come in to be program administrators will get training on document verification as well.
Okay. And then, so as far as banking, we've talked a little bit about banking and the potential benefit of this for banking. I don't know a whole lot about banking, but I know that when I open a bank account, that they want proof of who I am, and then they verify that. But also what I heard here is that we're not keeping any sort of database on the underlying documents here. So I would lean, this is probably more a question for you, Treasurer, because I know this is kind of your expertise. But how are the banks going to then verify that data if we don't have that data?
Mm-hmm. So we on the card, so great question. And so the verification that we would have is just did we issue it? So we will, you know, say that this is a verified person, this is a City of St. Louis issued ID, and each ID will have a number on it. So we're not going to keep any of that personally identifying number once we personally identifying information once we verify, but we will have a number to say like, all right, this is card 2344. Yes, we did issue card 2344. That is a verified ID in our database.
And in the database, let's say card 2344 is Brett and Ryan's card, and he lives at, you know, X address.
It won't. So we won't keep that personally identifying information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and again, that can be something that's up to that proprietor or what they will accept. So someone will say, well, you know what, if I can only identify that it was issued, maybe I'm not going to use that, and I have to, as a bank, I'm going to use another ID. Or they can accept that, you know, we kept our records and we did our due diligence. So it might be up to that proprietor.
Gotcha. And then one of the real benefits that I see of this, I think it's an inherently good thing to be able to identify people just from a law and order perspective. For people who, you mentioned that 15-day to kind of set up a residency, but for people who are transient or without a fixed address, are we going to be able to account for that at all, or are we looking at kind of proxy addresses and things like that?
Treasurer Lane, we talked about a proxy address, a residential proxy address, similar to how they administer the GBI program, and also I'd have to look at the state statute number, but like for victims of domestic violence and whatnot, they're also allowed to use a proxy address on things to protect their address. So Treasurer Lane, do you want to talk a little bit more specific about that?
Yep, absolutely. So it's essentially that. So again, the three main points is we want it to be accessible, we want it to be safe for all people, and we want it to be able to provide that advancement in mobility. So you might have a battered women's shelter or you know, an agency that works to advocate for and protect women who have been, or people who have been victims of domestic abuse, who may not want their information out there, or might be in transit when it comes to housing, so they can use them as a proxy. We talk about our unhoused residents. We don't want it to be a barrier to getting an ID, because like, well, I don't have a place to live right now, but I am looking for a job and the job requires an ID. I can't get an ID without having an address, can't get an address without having money. We want to really interrupt that cycle. So it might be St. Patrick's House, it might be a church that regularly serves unhoused, it may be one of the shelters, hospitals, institutions that can act as a proxy for our unhoused residents until they get some form of temporary or permanent housing.
Got it.
Yeah, but like you were saying again, it is safer to have those folks, even in transients, be able to be properly identified.
Exactly. No, I agree with you very much there. And do we have any indication of the number of people that we would expect to utilize this program?
So right now we have it budgeted for 7,500 cards a year. As I mentioned, based on what we've seen with the Missouri Access ID Coalition, they've heard 5,000. You know, there's directly in the city have asked for ID in the past couple years. Kansas City has issued somewhere around 6,000. I think they budgeted for 7,500, which is why we budgeted for 7,500 in the fiscal note. Obviously, it's an estimate, so I mean, you know, maybe we find out that there's a need more the first year. Maybe, you know, I mean, obviously that would be up to the treasurer to kind of, or the administrator to adjust the budget based on need. But we could find that there would be less. We could find that there would be more. But we based our fiscal note a lot off of Kansas City.
Got it. Yeah, the only kind of, I guess, pushback that I have against this as kind of a whole is I think when I'm looking at the cost of it, particularly if we're looking at rolling benefits into this, where, you know, you get discounts here, or you know, there's some tangible benefit to be had for it. I think people who can afford to pay for it should pay for it. I'm not saying they should pay, you know, $1 million for it, but just to offset the overall cost for people who cannot pay for it. I think that'll make this program more sustainable. You know, of course, I want people to be able to get ID if they are truly can't afford it, because I think it's an inherently good thing to be able to identify yourself. But if this is something we're going to be rolling benefits into, you know, I don't think that saying, hey, $10 for an ID that doesn't expire for 10 years, or if you're 65 ever, it is a massive burden if there's benefits associated with that. Would that be something that you'd be up for discussing further, Alderwoman?
Yes, I mean, so I think there are a couple, I just want to say one thing, and it was important, I think, to put the no cost in there for the people who can't afford it, that we make it clear that we have something that's accessible for all the reasons that you've heard Treasurer Lane and Sarah talk about. And, you know, the treasurer and I also talked about, there's a whole, whether we do a tiered system or there's public-private partnerships, I think that there's room that this doesn't have to be no cost for everybody. And certainly if we have additional benefits and people do want to pay, yes. But I also think one of the key things that we heard from members of the community who face those barriers is that cost. You know, we saw there's a stat from the survey that 85% of the people surveyed that cost was a barrier, right? So, I mean, making sure that we do have something, we do address that, and that is a core part of this. But I agree with you. I mean, if people want to pay for it and can pay for it, they should. And I don't know if Treasurer Lane has any other additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, I get the sentiment behind it. And I guess we could explore like what a sliding scale would look like for income. I would say that does mean that we take in more information to determine that. And then, you know, I'm not a cost estimator, but I would also, I mean, people might wonder like, and I know you were just throwing out $10, but then we'd have to figure out like what is an appropriate cost. So in terms of the actual card itself, and I know we can wrap in, you know, some percentage of the admin costs and, you know, staff's salary benefit that go into it in addition to just the physical or cost of the physical card. But, you know, if we say that the card costs 40 cents and then we're going to charge $5 or $10, people might say like, what is our justification? But yeah, the sliding scale could be something that we explore on that. Or, I mean, I know in some cases, what I've seen done is they'll just say there is a charge, but it's an optional charge. So people could pay it. It doesn't make someone who makes a certain amount of money pay it, but seen that done too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that the courts do pretty regularly is, you know, they say, here's the cost for this thing. If you can't afford to pay it, here's a you know, a piece of paper that says that you affirm that you cannot afford this. And that's the end of it. But I think that if there are benefits associated with this, I think that there are plenty of people who would be happy to you know, pay a few bucks, and that would, in my opinion, really offset some of these costs and make this a much more sustainable program long term. So I'd like to continue that discussion, Alderwoman, is all. And with that, I will yield.
All right, thank you very much, Alderman. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, questions or comments?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alderwoman Velasquez, and all of the other supporting people with this project of this legislation. I don't have any questions. I'm waiting and eagerly waiting to hear from the public. I know some amazing people that are here to speak on behalf of this. I have firsthand testimony and witness of the need for this when trying to access resources, not just for constituents, but for people that I don't even know, that have tried to reach out, not just in housing, but in employment, and other benefits that come from our very departments within the city of St. Louis. So I commend the treasurer's office and all the work that they continue to do with helping our most neediest neighbors here in the city. And again, I'm looking forward to hearing from the public. Thank you again for this legislation, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
All right, please make note of that, Rosalind. Thank you very much, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. All right,
No.
and I don't have any other. Alderman Cohn or Rashid has not shown up.
They're
Just
both,
going
They're
over.
here.
or chairman. It looks like they're both on.
They're here.
Oh, they're here? Oh,
Yeah, both of them are here.
Alderman from the Fifth Ward, I think your eyes are getting a little
They are?
bit.
All right.
I'm here.
We're working on an iPad. So next up, Alderman Aldridge, do you have any questions or comments of the sponsor or her presenters?
No questions. I think this is also a good piece of legislation. I think I really appreciate the Alderwoman from the 6th for bringing this forward. And with that, I would just leave that for any comment. But I really do appreciate the Alderwoman for bringing this one.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Alderman Cohn with us?
Yes.
Okay, I am.
You went on this all.
Eric, okay, you got him in my bottom right-hand corner.
Alderman, I am Mr. Chair.
All right, we've
I
taken a
am here.
vote.
I have
We've
no
ta-
questions.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
supportive
well,
of
we've
the
taken a
bill.
vote. If you do talk, we want you to swear you in, sir. All right, just some things I heard. So if there's no photo ID, this is not available to someone, correct? Is that
Photo ID, if it's not available, they'll need a photo ID to get.
okay? And the photo ID is, and I'll go through it again, but we're specifying that it has to be this, or this for a photo ID, not their old grade school or
Right.
also ID or something that they got for a school or alumnus. It has to be some sort of official. All right.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Up to the administrator, but yes, and then he's well aware, but all the programs that do this in the city, they're official.
Well, yeah, just because most of the people who don't have a photo ID, to me, are the people who are in need of this ID. And I'm guessing, there's no way of accommodating that. In other words, there's some people who have never had a photo ID in their lives and have been missing out on things because of that. So if they don't have that, they still are unable to acquire this new ID, correct?
Well, usually there's a combination of like 2 documents for proof of identification.
But a photo ID is one of the 2 demands.
In what we've seen that in the cities, they tend to require a photo ID as one of the proofs of identification.
Is that going to be a demand in this particular, on our case? Because I've heard that no photo ID, no photo, then there's no ID.
The way that the bill is written is up to the discretion of the program
Okay.
administrator.
Okay, because naturally there, as I've gotten my emails and things from both sides. The way outside, I'm sure we got a few of those where there are people concerned that, this is going to make illegal aliens all of a sudden citizens of the city of St. Louis. And I'm aware that that's not going to happen, but we need to reassure through this dissertation or as we go through this process with this bill that is profoundly made public that, you have to be, because the 15 days I'm sure is alarming to some people when they hear that, to prove you've been a citizen of the city of St. Louis for 15 days only. Not that there's any great benefits to that, as I understand it at this point. But you're saying that, because I don't see there's nothing illegal going on here. It's just, I understand the concept. I'm just playing devil's advocate here with the stacks of concerns I've gotten from the public.
No, and I do want to speak to, there was a version of this bill that had all the identifications in it. And when we looked at other pieces of legislation like Kansas, and I know that we are our own city and unique and we can do our own thing, but like Kansas City and like Chicago, it really, just because I think names and things of documents can change, it just seemed to be more flexible if we didn't have the specific documents in there. But if you go back and look at what those cities do and what their programs require, it is very clear.
Okay, well, and the clarity is what we're going to be to keep this above board. I guess it would be the proper way of getting this through, because we're trying to help people. We want to make it acceptable for the people that need help. People always find a way to abuse everything that goes through, and to limit that abuse would be our goal here. So if a list of an amendment may be listing accepted but not demanded at this point, the demand being at the discretion of the treasurer's office, but you might create a between now and whatever, a friendly amendment saying that these are the list of things we will accept that are acceptable, and at the discretion of the office, these are the things that they will demand, or in other words, if you leave it open, some guy's going to come in with something and say, well, I'm just trying to, again, play devil's advocate and make sure that we are helping the people we're supposed to be helping.
Yeah, and I'd be open to a friendly amendment. I think if we sent something limited, including but not limited to, language.
Yes.
I'm not sure, hope that will work with the treasurer as well. We want to, again, I think, we want to make it flexible. We don't want to, we've got obviously language in there to, make sure that we prevent fraud, and we want to be mindful. More than mindful.
Yeah. If an average of 6,000 people out of 290,000 people using this, I understand that the concept of the program, and I believe it will do some good things, but just trying to get on the end, maybe look at this as it goes through the process. Let's tighten it up some. We can do that today. I think we have time between now and if it goes out to the floor, to put these things into it and work from that. I don't see a problem with. It seems like this would come out today with a vote, but I think we do need to tweak it a little to make the public feel more secure in what we're doing here, because there are, according to my emails, many doubts in people's minds that we're making it easier for people who maybe shouldn't have an ID to get an ID, but we do need to help the people who require these to move their lives forward. The only other thing, as far as Alderman Ryan's of the cost effectiveness or trying to prolong this, if you might, and again, something that could be put in for the first 2 years. This is free to all, and to boom, 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 to keep us as it goes. To maybe, you know, it's your introductory offer for this today, only ordered by midnight tonight. You get this, but but to keep sustaining, if it is something that as you're talking about growing this, tying it to library cards and metro passes, or other city requirements where you can go in and maybe swipe this. Is there going? I guess the design is not complete. Will this have a swipe thing in it for things such as that, or?
I'm gonna let the treasurer talk about that. We've had a couple different conversations
So
about.
I mean, that's nothing that's in this bill. That's something that goes, I mean, the function of this card in the future could grow into a very, very good thing for the city.
Right.
If done properly, where you can have commercial entities tie in their products with this. I see that. And I read a little about what New York's done and that. So, and that's my purpose is, yeah, we can get this out today, I believe, but I believe that we need to tighten it up and make the public again feel more secure. With that, I am finished. We've had all the conversations. I see Alderman Clark Hubbard has her hand up. Please proceed.
Alderman Machine does that as well.
Yeah, but she has seniority over him.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and committee members. And again, I have received some of those messages as well, and I look forward to working to us to get over that hump again for the greater good of the impact of this. When I spoke earlier, I said there were some amazing people that were here ready to speak, and one of them was Rabbi Susan Talvey, who just had to exit, but I think her comments are so valuable in this process, and so I would like to share them. She said she had to leave, but this bill makes her so proud to be a part of St. Louis. It's visionary and shows compassion, and is a win-win for all of us. It makes sure that no one is invisible, and the work that she does with the Ashray Foundation, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Ashray Foundation and the work they do with ID, and they know through that work that this is an essential step to make sure that we can continue to take care of each other. It's about access, which I spoke about earlier. So again, thank you for this legislation, and I would like to work with my colleagues to make sure that everyone is comfortable in this, because again, this is for ultimately everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Alderwoman. Alderman Rashid. Aldridge, where are you at, sir? Alderman Aldridge. We need your smile here.
I
There.
know. I know that's exactly what you want, Chairman. I think I just, I want to be very clear. Like, I think this is a very good piece of legislation, and I echo everything the Alderwoman from the tent just said. I think I do have just a few questions, and what I want to be clear is the Alderwoman of the 6 actually have done a lot of great work into this legislation and making sure that like questions and answers have been answered. But in this conversation, just a few questions. So with this ID card, I'm curious, can this card be used for like housing? Can this card be used for ways that an individual can use this to maybe cash a check or anything? And that's my question, but I do also want to give credit to the Alderwoman from the 6. I know she asked me about questions ahead of time, but I think the Alderman from the 4th did bring up some just good questions of like, how do we move forward with this ID card to make sure that this is something that we can do in the city, which Kansas City has done, and it's been super successful, which I think we need to move this forward in the city, but to be able to answer some of those questions, at least on my end, on like, what does that look like for housing, cash in the check, and other necessary items with this ID card?
No, great questions, Alderman. I appreciate the questions after I asked about questions. So, I mean, that's what it's here for. And, it's good dialogue. So as I understand it, I mean, basically any kind of thing that asks you for a government issued ID. So if you need a government issued ID to like rent an apartment from a private landlord, this could satisfy that. If it says, if you need to go cash a check and it's a government issued photo ID, this would be a government issued photo ID. And there are some forms, and I think you'll probably hear from some folks who are here to testify later, but there are even some employment forms that they ask for a government issued photo ID. And as you know, as long as it doesn't sort of specify it has to be issued by a state warrant, you have to have a, you know, a federal passport. I mean, if there are things that are required for that you need a government issued ID for, it should be able to satisfy that. It should be able, so people should be able to, you know, rent an apartment if one of the requirements is, I need to see, you need to have proof of a government issued photo ID to rent this apartment.
And then one last question, which I have full confidence in the treasurer's office, but so currently in the city, so we used to do IDs through the collector revenue. And then we lost that contract. So it's not through the collector revenue, but you have to provide birth certificate through the collector,
Recorder of deeds.
recorder deeds. And so to be clear, this would be a new function for the treasurer's office, as far as like issuing IDs. If I'm not mistaken, that would be something that the like treasurer's office haven't done, which clear, so we're in public, got full confidence in treasurer's office. But this would be a new function for the treasurer's office to produce a muni ID for individuals that would use this.
Yes, this would be a new function for the treasurer. And as far as we've talked a little bit about the relationship with what the recorder of deeds does with the treasurer's office does. And I mean, the recorder of deeds could be, you know, some of those ID documents, right? Like you might need to get a birth certificate if you were born in the city of St. Louis that is from the recorder of deeds. And so, you know, maybe there's a relationship where we can, you know, work something out that makes it easier for people to do that. But this will be a new function for the treasurer. And I don't know if the treasurer wants to comment, if he's still on, if he wants to make any additional comments on that.
Yeah, I can speak to that, and thank you for that that confidence in our office, Alderman Aldridge. But yeah, so we haven't produced an ID yet, but we have been able to stand up a few programs to be able to issue physical cards to folks, and with those programs, take in information, be able to verify information with our partners. And we've reached out to both we've spoken with the vendor that provides the cards to our CSB. And we've also had our IT connect on the equipment that CSB currently uses to issue the city IDs. So we're pretty confident also. So we did our due diligence before saying yes to the alderwoman as well, to make sure that it was feasible and that we were doing something or being able to say yes to something that we could actually do.
Okay. Alderman Aldridge, does that satisfy your
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And to be clear, like I said, I'm very confident in our treasurer's office. I know our treasurer runs a very tight ship. It's just curious how this program will work in that office. Historically, knowing when you need a ID, this would be different, a muni ID, that it goes from a birth certificate from the recorder of deeds office then to the collector revenue office, and we lost that contract to be able to produce IDs. So just making sure if we do this, and if I vote for it, that like, when I have full confidence again in the treasurer, that the treasurer office can be able to do a new function that has not been a function before, of producing these muni IDs. So yes, that's my, yes.
And just so you know, too, we also talk to collector revenue daily. And again, not to get to the iterative pieces of the program, but I mean, and the things that it could be, I mean, there are ways that depending on the card capacity, you know, and how it works with programs, that maybe there are ways that this card could interface with the things that office does, but no, it would be separate, obviously, as Treasurer Lane explained.
And with that interface, and I missed maybe part of the council, would that interface need legislation change, or would that interface just be a interdepartment
No, I mean, some things that we've just talked about, again, this is just conversation, because I mean, I think, so the program in the bill, it has 6 months implementation, but if we're thinking about how to grow it like Chicago, right? I mean, maybe there's a place where people, and again, it has to be done in all the right ways that Treasurer Lane explained about data, but maybe people could get, if they have property tax refunds, maybe they could get it on their card. Again, maybe if they have, I mean, there could be different things that, again, it could be a benefit. The card could have different capabilities than just an ID. But, you know, that is kind of phase 2 and beyond. But we want to be able to, I mean, part of the conversation we've had with the treasurer's office is thinking about how do we start a program that has the capacity to grow. And so making sure they have the technology, making sure we're asking the right questions at the beginning to say, okay, if we wanted to have a card with multiple capabilities in 3 years, can we be thinking about that now, even though we're not going to do that now, but can we be thinking about that now, and build up to that?
All right. Okay, my hope would be that eventually, administratively, this could be a one-stop shop for someone, that they're not going to have to go from office to office to office, having had a liquor license for the past 35 plus years. You have to go to this room, then you have to go to that room, then you have to go to that room. I'm hoping that someone with their paperwork can walk in, get their ID and walk out is the dream and hope here, as opposed to creating a roller, little carousel for folks. And something else I heard Alderman Alders bring up, banks and purveyors, their acceptance of this card is based upon their business practices. So someone, I guess, just because they have this, can't expect this to be taken. It is not mandatory by our city government rules that someone in the city has to take this card for ID. That's my understanding is in reading through this, and the conversation is correct.
Correct. I mean, obviously, the city will, and its services and agencies will accept it, but I mean, we can legally.
That just needs to be, again, having dealt with the public for a long time, when the cards are issued, that should be part of a spiel. This card is good, but not, it's when you get just little things that we need to tighten up as we go along here. Again, the concept is a very, very good concept. It just has a lot of things that we need to squeal out here. So with that, Rosalind, how many public speakers do we have signed up?
We have 4 online, and I've moved them over to the panelists so you can squirm in.
Okay. So I need to have you all visible.
Yes.
All right. And because I see I see a Christine. I see Liam. I feel like Miss Romper Room here, Miss Lewis. I see Keith and Betsy. All right. Okay. If you all 4 will turn your microphones on, please, at this time, and raise your right hand. Since we can see, I'll swear all 4 of you in at one time. It's my German nature. Okay. Do you swear the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I do. Yes.
All right. Having heard all of you affirm that, we'll go alphabetically by first name. So Betsy, you're up.
Great. Well, thank you. My name is Betsy Miller, and I manage the North City Photo ID Project, which is a project of the Ashray Foundation. We've been around and doing this work for a little bit more than 2 years. And in terms of volume, I'll give you a sense. We've seen about 2,300 guests, most of them needing a photo ID. So kind of testified to the need being there. I know Christine will speak probably after me if we're going alphabetically. And with her program and the program that she's involved with, they see a higher demand than we do. And over the last 2 years, the demand's just been increasing. It's not decreasing. So as we've talked here today, and you guys have been obviously kind of sharing and talking about housing, employment are really the top 2 things that folks come to us for when they're looking for help getting a state ID. And then there are some challenges folks are facing. And so you guys also talked about this as well, transportation. So coming to us, then going to Vital Records, then going to license office can be a bit of a burden for some of the folks that we're working with. And then also there's the financial burden. At a minimum, if it's a Missouri-born individual and they're getting a non-driver photo ID, it's $33. And for some folks in our community and folks that we're seeing, that can be a burden and can be a barrier. Could be choice between getting groceries or getting an ID, or getting medical care and getting an ID. So I really appreciate having the conversation today and being able to speak out in favor of this ID. I do think it will help people get employment, get housing. Again, two of those most basic needs that folks have in our community. And also to the point about a one-stop shop, I'm hoping that will be the case as well, to help with some of the transportation barriers that I mentioned before. So thank you very much for giving me a couple minutes to speak on behalf of this bill.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much. And I forgot to mention, I'm trying to keep comments to 3 or 4 minutes, and you were actually 2:03. So very good. Thank you. Government can be efficient sometimes. Thank you. All right, Christine, you are next. You're sworn in, so please proceed with the 3 or 4 minute dissertation.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Christine Dragonette. I'm the Director of Social Ministry at St. Francis Xavier College Church. We're the Catholic Church on the campus of St. Louis University. And as Betsy mentioned, we've had a program for over 30 years now that has supported people with getting Missouri non-driver photo IDs and birth certificates from any state. Obviously, we cannot print those documents on site, so we facilitate people through the process. And then there are some other stops that folks must make after visiting us. And so we see about 3,500 people in a year. Just this morning in the bitter cold, we had 60 people come to see us. And then we have folks stop in throughout the week. We're only open on Tuesday morning, so we have people come in hoping to see us for IDs other times of the week when we're not able to support. So I think one thing that's really clear to us in our program, and that I really want to underscore, is the level of urgency that folks come to us with. So we see people from all different backgrounds and scenarios, but often we see people who, for example, I spoke with someone who said, I have a job that I could start now if I had an ID being the one only barrier that is stopping them from starting that job. Or I was born in another state. And so the hard part about what we do is that then we have to say, I'm really sorry, but we have to get your birth certificate first. And that could take up to 4 to 6 weeks. In some states, that could take up to half a year just to get the birth certificate sent so that someone can apply for a Missouri photo ID. So to be able to have a way for people to access identification that can prove their identity, and hopefully through partnerships, be able to afford them some level of access to be able to move forward in the meantime would be huge for a lot of folks. Through the state of Missouri, there is a form that allows social service providers, they term them homeless service providers, to be able to provide proof of Missouri residency, just to speak to one of the questions that was discussed earlier. So there is an official form through the state, and I imagine there could be something similar to be able to receive IDs and vouch for someone's residency for a Missouri state photo ID. And that's something that we can do at our agency. And I will just say, even the time between a person applying for their ID and it being sent in the mail a couple weeks later, a lot of folks are transient enough that it's hard for us to get back in touch with them. So being able to have that one-stop shop where people can get everything taken care of in one day will be really, truly key. And we have to send those IDs back to Jefferson City if we can't get back in touch with people. So often if people are unhoused, if people are experiencing domestic or intimate partner violence, those are scenarios that can make it hard to have a gap in between. And not to mention, we know that we can be a barrier too. If people are coming to us and then going to these offices, it just is a lot of steps. And I will just mention too, it's pretty standard to have secondary forms of identification that are non-photo ID to be able to be acceptable in lieu of a photo ID in order to prove identity for the purpose of birth certificates and other kind of identification documents. That's something that we are aware of as well. And then, yeah, I definitely think the carousel kind of metaphor that you named, Alderman Vollmer, is really is really accurate. Like we just see a lot of people who are kind of in this carousel of needing one document for the other. And in the meantime, there's plenty of ways to prove their identity, but it's just not the right ways at the right time and the right places. So to be able to have a way of proving someone's identity would be really key. And then on a lighter note, I would just say, I think it's something that sounds really nice for all of us. Both of my siblings live in New York City, so I just texted them to ask about the ID NYC. And my sister responded when she first moved there. She got the municipal ID there, and it got her a year membership for a number of different museums, and was a really great way for her to get to know the city and feel like she really belonged there and was kind of immersed in everything there is going on. So I think we're talking about the specific kind of communities who really need municipal IDs, but I think there's also an opportunity for a sense of belonging and participation in civic life that a municipal ID affords as well. So I would look forward to having it as well.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, and Keith Rose. There we are, sir. Please proceed.
Hi, Chair Vollmer. So my name is Keith Rose. I am with the Center for Growing Justice. We're a nonprofit law firm in St. Louis who helps people who cannot afford legal representation with criminal cases and also with gender and name change cases. And in my previous role as the director of LGBTQ initiatives at the St. Louis Equal Housing Opportunity Council, I oversaw a report on LGBT access to housing in St. Louis. And through our research back in 2022 and 2023, I came across this real problem that not only our clients were having, but a lot of other providers in the area were talking about, where people couldn't access housing because they didn't have an ID, but also couldn't access other resources that we would have just for unhoused people because they didn't have an ID. It was the first time in my life I learned that many food pantries actually require you to show an ID just to get a bag of groceries. Which wasn't the case when I was growing up. What we've seen over the past few years is, as the Missouri State Legislature has tried to crack down on access to voting, they've increased the barriers for getting a state ID. And at the same time, agencies that give out services to the unhoused or other populations, to stop fraud, they have increased their standards for what they require as documentation for people who are seeking those services. And so we see a lot of people who just get stuck out. And what happens, even when programs that are funded by the Board of Aldermen are enacted, there are a lot of people who just can't access those services. And so we're hoping that by creating this ID, it'll have a knock-on effect that people who go to government-funded programs to get services from the city will actually be able to access these resources. I want to quickly address some concerns I have with Alderman Ryan's means testing idea. We've seen that means testing makes a lot of sense on paper, and you can understand why it wouldn't make sense for someone with $100,000 salary to get a free ID. There are a few problems that I really want to point out from on-the-ground work. One, when talking to Kansas City, they told us that to enact a payment system for their ID would actually not be worth the cost. Having to build that entire structure and then figure out who can pay and who can't would actually cost more than just doing it for free. Secondly, I want to point out that the state of Missouri already has a means testing approach for state IDs. But because of how these things are administered, we still have people who can't get one. As a matter of fact, the court, which Alderman Ryan mentioned, has a process for people to get their court fees waived here in St. Louis City. But at the same time, my own organization has given out $25,000 over the past 2 years to poor people looking to file cases because the barriers are so high. Even just the affidavit is not accepted in many cases. So by creating the Muni ID, we were hoping to limit barriers, and I would really encourage the board to not recreate another high barrier ID. Additionally, the kind of people who don't have a scrap of identification and who would need this Muni ID also wouldn't be able to prove that they don't have the income necessary to pay for it. And so it makes much more sense to just have a blanket free ID, just like our libraries have. I want to take a few minutes just to thank Alderwoman Velasquez. She's done so much work on this. I first started getting involved in this back in November of 2023, and the Alderwoman has spent a full year learning about programs in other cities, talking to people in those cities, talking to providers I'd never even heard of. She's had such a wide range of opinions on this. And she did a great job, I would say, in finding Treasurer Lane's office to be the house for this program. We looked at a lot of county offices here in the city, and one of the things we were really happy to hear is that Treasurer Lane has such a good relationship with local banks already that we think it will be pretty easy for this card to be accepted by some of our local institutions. And we think that additional benefit certainly makes the treasurer's office the best place for this. But I also was really happy when we had a sit-down meeting with community providers in the treasurer's office and Alderwoman Velasquez to just hear how much thought they've put into implementing this program, how agile their department is going to be when it comes to implementing it next year. And it really feels like they are ready to hit the ground running. And so I'm really excited that the treasurer's office is holding this program based on what I've seen. And the last thing I just want to say is when we're talking about implementing a municipal ID like the Gateway card in the city, it's really important to understand that uptake is important. And so we talk about all of these knock-on programs that we might add, things like maybe Metro access, maybe rolling out the library card. One of the best reasons for doing that is that we want as many people to have this card in their pocket as possible, because it lowers the stigma for those who only have this card in their pocket. And it also increases awareness for people who are receiving the card so that they know what it is. It's not some anomaly that they then have questions about and might reject. And so it is really important that we have as many people have this as possible. And so I wouldn't say that having a card that is desirable is actually a negative and therefore we should charge for it. Instead, what I would say is that is the cost of making sure that enough people have this card so that this card is an effective use of identification. Because if only the poor people have this ID card, then there are many people who don't want to show it because it will actually be a stigmatized piece of identity. And so I really encourage us to do whatever we can to get as many St. Louisans to have a Gateway card and make sure that they can have it for free whenever they need it. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. All right, and last on our list is Liam. All right, please unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Liam. I just want to thank Chair Fulmer. I grew up on the Hill, and so being able to advocate to you is a different change of pace compared to going to Bochi with my mom on Monday nights. But so I want to thank you and Alderwoman Velasquez for bringing this important bill. Again, my name is Liam John. I'm a public health professional now, and I work in permanent supportive housing. I do property management. And on top of that, so I'm going to talk about housing and how this helps our housing and address the concerns around fraud and that. And then I also want to address just the idea of city engagement, because in public health, we often think about the movement of people and how that impacts our health. And so I'll start there. St. Louis, about 4 families, it's probably higher now since the last census data, but 4 families per every 1 family moves out of the city every day. And so that's a concerning number because our population is rapidly decreasing, which also addresses like our tax revenue, right? And so if people aren't in the city, they're not paying taxes. And so there has to be different engaging tools to keep people in a city. So whatever it looks like to create like a sense of city pride. We saw this with the soccer stadium a lot, right? Like the soccer stadium, now people are wearing scarves. Now people have the sweaters, the jerseys, everything like that. And we're able to create a sense of city pride. This card would be no different, right? And so creating those engagement tools, while we take a little bit of hit from people that do have income that can afford it, it also boosts our city pride. It boosts the ability for people to be joyous of their city. And I think that oftentimes St. Louis doesn't get that as much. But people are really prideful about our city. And so it's just a way to show that. But more on housing and employment. So like I said, I work in HUD housing. So we have scrupulous ID requirements that HUD tells us. And one of the ID requirements is a government issued photo ID. But HUD also says the municipal ID distributed by a local government works as that. So the federal government has done their due diligence in ensuring that this isn't going to cause a sense of fraud in their housing. So I want to be able to trust in them. But but they also require other things, right? So employment, for instance, the I-9 form, they say that a municipal ID would work for I-9 forms, but we know I-9 forms, we know that there's 2 different IDs that are required. So this just helps someone cross off one of those items on their list. It isn't trying to defraud how we get our employment. But what I am going to say is that people without IDs, it is a life or death situation, and we do need that. For housing, for instance, I was working with one person who was born on a military base to a military family, and to get a military birth certificate, military birth abroad birth certificate can take up to 6 months to a year. And this was at the height of COVID when federal government was really backed up in different processes. It took him about a year to get his birth certificate. And in that time, his name came up on the housing authority's housing wait list for housing. But because he didn't have that government issued photo ID, he wasn't able to get it. His name was taken off, and then he had to start all over again. He's still outside today, as of last time I had checked on him in the winter. And when I checked on him in the winter, he was covered in blankets and was in a daze because he was so cold. Where upon another winter, this stuff is going to happen again, and people are not getting into housing purely based off a piece of plastic. So if we can work to eliminate one of the barriers, not all the barriers, right? There's a lot of barriers that go into housing and employment and things like that. If we can eliminate one of them while also boosting our local economy, I think it is a net good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, sir. All right. With that, we have concluded all our testimony. Do you have any written testimony, Rosalind, in the drive for this?
We have none.
No written testimony. Okay. With that, I will let the sponsor close.
Thank you, Chairman. That is all I have. I would like to call for, I would like the committee to consider a due pass recommendation, and hopefully somebody would like to make a motion for that.
Good job. I'll ask them. All right. And that concludes your process. We will then entertain a motion for a due pass recommendation of Board Bill 137. I'll entertain a motion.
I think I'm the only one still on. So we'll move that we pass Board Bill 137 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
That I'll request a roll call. Rosalind, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Cone is aye.
Okay. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
Chair Ballmer.
Aye.
I have 6 aye votes.
All right. By your vote, we have passed out with a due pass recommendation, Board Bill 137 to the full board. Thank you. All you speakers, you are welcome to exit the process as we go through our next piece of business here. Resolutions for review. Item number 1 is Resolution 195. Alderwoman Velazquez, you are up again.
Want me to go back and then come back up?
There you go.
Come back. All right, I'll keep this one short, everybody. Resolution 195 is procedural. It is the budget for the Tower Grove Concerned Citizens Special Business District. As part of the ordinance, they're required to obviously have a public meeting, advertise their public meeting, go through the budget in a public manner, and then submit the budget to the board and put it in this lovely resolution format, which is what they did. We passed one last year. This year, I think it's in your drive, but the total available funds is $347,000. And we have the resolution outlines specifically what their total operating expenses are going to be, or projected for being, what their programs are, including security patrols, trash pickup, security cameras, community engagement. And they still have a net leftover balance of $100,000, but they followed the ordinance to the T. And I've been a part of the process for this for the past couple years. So this budget is from beginning from the calendar year of January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. So obviously would like to get it passed in 2024 as the ordinance states, to have it passed in the fall. So with that, I am open to any questions the committee may have.
All right, thank you very much, Alderman Cone, will you have any questions or comments? Alderman Cone? Looks like he's left the building. Alderman Ryan?
No questions. Thank you.
Alderman Clark Hubbard?
No questions, thank you.
All right, Alderman Aldridge? I believe he's left the building or is not answering. All right, and are there the special business, is this a physical area or is it like this?
It's a physical area. I would have to look at the exact
Yeah.
areas, but it's Roger, it's around where Fanning School is in Tower Grove
Yeah,
South.
because I started the Tower Grove South Business Association way back when this is a separate from way back when you were in high school, probably. I started that district over there when I.
No, this
in
is
my
a
world.
pretty small, maybe 8 or 10 blocks. It's a
Yeah,
pretty small.
okay. All right. Wonderful, wonderful. With that, I'll entertain a motion to pass out resolution 195 with a due pass recommendation.
Move.
Second.
Anyone want to call for previous roll?
Previous roll.
Can we do that with people left?
Well, they can still be on there. They don't have to be present.
They can object.
Hearing no objection to previous roll, we have passed out resolution 195 with a due pass recommendation to the full board. Thank you very much, Alderman Velasquez, for entertaining us today.
You're welcome. That's all I got.
All right. Line item 6, committee discussions. We have none. We have no written testimony. Announcements. I'm announcing that we have no announcements. All right. Well, everyone was present eventually, so we will take that with it. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the legislation meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Previous roll.
No objections.
Hearing no objection, the meeting is adjourned. Say goodbye to the duck or the goose.